Hello, my name is Mason Harlow. I'm 29 years old, a tour guide living in Minneapolis, where tree-lined streets and the quietly flowing Mississippi River feel like a silent friend. My job is to lead travelers through breathtaking routes, from the vast forests of Minnesota to the misty peaks of Colorado. I love freedom, the feeling of the wind rushing through my hair as I stand on a cliff, and the stories of strangers I meet along the way. But if you ask me about my past, about where I began, I'd have to take a deep breath before telling you. Because that story isn't just about journeys, it's about scars, about the voids I've spent years trying to fill. I was born in Traverse City, Michigan, a small, beautiful town with cherry tree-lined streets and lakes that shimmer like silver. But my childhood wasn't as sweet as those ripe cherries. My father, Peter Harlow, was a stern man, always consumed by his work, a small company supplying construction equipment. My mother, Judith, was the opposite, a dreamer who loved writing and painting, but her dreams never seemed to include me. They argued constantly, their loud disputes echoing from the living room, piercing through my bedroom door where I'd curl up in bed, clutching my old stuffed bear to drown out the shouting. When I was 7, they divorced. I still remember that day. The sky was gray, threatening rain. I sat on the couch, my short legs dangling, not touching the floor, watching my parents point and yell at each other. "You take the kid, I don't have time," my mother screamed. "Are you kidding? I'm drowning in work at the company. You think I have time to play babysitter?" My father shot back, his voice cold as ice. I just sat there, not crying, not speaking, watching them like they were strangers. In the end, they agreed on the only thing they ever did. Neither of them wanted me. So I was sent to live with my grandparents. Their old wooden house sat at the end of a pine-shaded road not far from our old home. My father drove me there in his weathered pickup truck, the smell of motor oil and worn leather seats making me nauseous. I clung tightly to my small backpack, which held a few clothes and my favorite toys. I didn't know what awaited me, only that from now on I'd be living with my grandparents. When the truck stopped, my grandmother was already there, her frail arms outstretched, her gentle smile as if ready to embrace the whole world. "Hello, Mason," she said, her voice warm like a hug. I ran into her arms, not crying, but the first sense of safety in days made my chest tighten. My grandparents' house was a magical place, at least to a child like me. It wasn't large, but it was cozy, filled with the scent of pine wood and freshly baked cookies. The living room had an old fireplace where my grandfather would sit and read the newspaper, his glasses sliding down his nose. He was a tall man, his hair streaked with gray, but his deep blue eyes always sparkled when he talked about the things he loved, like finance, investments, or how the world works. "Mason, you know money isn't everything, but it's a tool to live the life you want," he'd say, pointing to an old notebook filled with numbers and charts. To me, a kid who only cared about running around in the fields, those things didn't matter. I'd nod absently, then sneak outside to play, chasing rabbits in the woods or skipping stones across the lake. But my grandfather never pushed me. He'd just smile, his eyes twinkling as if he knew a secret I didn't yet understand. "One day you'll see, Mason," he'd say in his deep voice. "Everything I'm teaching you isn't to tie you down, it's to give you wings." I didn't know what he meant, so I'd just grin and run off, my muddy shoes leaving prints on the path. My grandmother loved me just as much as my grandfather did. She was the embodiment of kindness. Every morning she'd wake me with the smell of toasted bread and homemade cherry jam. She taught me how to tie my shoes, fold clothes, and told me stories about her and my grandfather's youth. "Your grandfather was a soldier once, but his heart is soft as cotton," she'd say, her eyes shining with pride. She was always there, mending the tears in my clothes, wiping my tears when I fell, or holding me close when I asked about my parents. "They're just lost, Mason," she'd say, though I knew she was only trying to comfort me. The truth was, my parents never called, never wrote. I was like a forgotten object, and my grandparents were the ones who picked me up, dusted me off, and loved me with everything they had. Life in Traverse City wasn't a perfect picture, but it was where I felt loved. I grew up among grassy fields, afternoons fishing by the lake with my grandfather, or evenings listening to my grandmother's fairy tales. But deep down, I always carried a void. I envied my friends who were picked up by their parents after school or showed off birthday gifts from their families while I only had my grandparents. I didn't resent my parents, but I wondered, what had I done wrong to make them not want me? When I was 10, I asked my grandfather, "Why don't Mom and Dad want to be with me?" He stopped writing, put down his pen, and looked at me for a long time. "It's not like that, Mason. Sometimes grown-ups make selfish choices because they don't know how to love. But you don't need them to become a good man. You have me, you have your grandma, and most importantly, you have yourself." His words stuck with me, but the pain lingered like a scar that never fully heals. As I grew into a teenager, I became a free spirit craving adventure. I fell in love with long trips, roads leading to places no one knew. My grandfather still tried to teach me about finance, stocks, and investment funds, but I only half listened. "Grandpa, I don't want to be tied down by numbers," I once said, laughing loudly. He'd shake his head, but his eyes seemed to say, "You'll understand one day." In those years, I lived like a fledgling bird, soaring everywhere but always returning to my grandparents' warm nest. They were my harbor, the place I knew would always welcome me no matter how far I wandered. But I didn't know that those peaceful days were about to end, and a great storm was waiting for me on the horizon. I left Traverse City at 18 to study tourism and event management at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. I loved this field because it sounded free. I didn't want to be tied to an office where numbers or endless meetings would bury my youth. I wanted to live, to breathe the air of forests, to hear the waves crash on distant shores. So after graduating, I stayed in Minneapolis and landed a job as a tour guide. It was the perfect job for me, leading groups through stunning routes from the crystal-clear lakes of Minnesota to the majestic mountains of Colorado. I loved telling stories, seeing the spark in travelers' eyes when they encountered a natural wonder for the first time. Each trip was an adventure, and I felt truly alive. But no matter how far I traveled, Traverse City was still home. Every few months, I'd drive back to visit my grandparents, bringing stories from my trips, snapshots taken on the road, or a small gift like a jar of cherry jam from my grandmother. My grandfather would still sit by the fireplace, his old notebook in hand, asking about my job and my life. "Still flying around like a bird, huh, Mason?" he'd say, his deep voice tinged with a smile. I'd nod, laughing loudly, but a small part of my heart was always reserved for him. The man who taught me that independence wasn't just freedom, but responsibility. Then when I was 27, everything changed. One autumn morning, I got a call from my grandmother. Her voice trembled over the phone, no longer the warm tone I knew. "Mason, your grandfather, he has cancer. The doctors say it's lung cancer, late stage." I stood frozen in my small Minneapolis apartment, the phone slipping from my hand and hitting the floor. Cancer. The word stabbed my chest like a knife. I couldn't imagine my grandfather, the tall, strong man who sat calmly by the fireplace with a smile, being defeated by illness. I started spending more time in Traverse City. My tour guiding trips became shorter, and my rare days off were devoted to my grandparents. Each time I stepped into their familiar wooden house, my heart grew heavy. My grandfather no longer sat by the fireplace. He lay in bed, frail, his deep blue eyes now clouded with pain and medication. But he still tried to smile when he saw me. "Don't look so grim, Mason," he said weakly. "I'm still here, not going anywhere yet." I nodded, but tears welled up. I didn't want him to see me cry, so I'd quietly slip outside, sit by the lake, stare at the shimmering water, and wonder why life was so unfair. The next 2 years were a long, painful blur. My grandfather fought the disease, but I could see him fading. Each visit he was thinner, his voice softer, his stories shorter. My grandmother, though in her 70s, cared for him with all her love. She cooked his favorite meals, though he could barely eat. She sat by his bed, holding his hand, recounting stories of their youth. I tried to help with chores, but I couldn't shake the helplessness. I wanted to do something, anything, to keep him here. One afternoon, as I sat by his bed, he took my hand, his cold, trembling hand gripping mine. "Mason," he said, his voice hoarse, "remember what I taught you. Money isn't everything, but it's a tool. Use it right, and you can do great things." I nodded, though I wanted to scream that I didn't need money, I just needed him. But I said nothing, only held his hand tightly as if holding on could keep him from leaving. The day my grandfather died, I was leading a group in Wisconsin, deep in a vast forest. My grandmother called at dawn as the mist still clung to the paths. "Mason, your grandfather passed away," she said, her voice choked with tears. I stood frozen, unable to speak, my heart pounding. I asked my best friend Tom to take over the group, then raced back to Traverse City. The 400-mile drive felt endless. I turned on the radio, but all I could hear was my grandfather's voice in my head. "You have yourself, Mason. That's the most important thing." On the drive, I clung to a faint hope that my parents, or at least my father, might show up at my grandfather's grave, if only to say goodbye. But when I stepped into the wooden house, the thick silence gripped my heart, as if the air itself was heavy with loss. My grandmother sat in an armchair, her eyes red, her face etched with grief. She stood, her frail arms wrapping tightly around me. "Mason, your grandfather couldn't stay with us anymore," she whispered, her voice breaking, as if it took all her strength to say it. I hugged her tightly, tears threatening to spill, but held back. "Grandma, did he go peacefully?" I asked, my voice trembling. She nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "He passed in his sleep, without pain." I took a deep breath to stay calm, then blurted out, "Grandma, did Mom and Dad come? Did they know?" She looked at me, her eyes sad but resolute. "Your grandfather didn't want them here, Mason. He said they didn't deserve to be." I stood still. A small part of me, however faint, had hoped my parents would show up to share in this loss. But my grandfather was right. The people who abandoned me as a child had no right to stand here in this sacred moment to bid farewell to the man who gave me a home. My grandfather's funeral was simple as he wished. Just me, my grandmother, and a few close neighbors who'd known him since he was young. We stood by his grave under cherry trees, the wind whispering like his final words. I placed a bouquet of white daisies, his favorite flower, on his grave and said goodbye in my heart. I didn't cry, but my chest felt crushed. My grandfather wasn't just the man who raised me. He was the only real father I'd ever had. A month after the funeral, as grief still shadowed me, I got a call from a man named James Whitaker, my grandfather's lawyer. "Mason, can you come to my office in Traverse City? We need to discuss your grandfather's will." I agreed, though I didn't think much of it. I assumed he'd left the wooden house, some keepsakes, or a small savings. I wasn't prepared for what I'd hear. Mr. Whitaker's office was in the heart of town, a small room lined with bookshelves and the smell of old wood. Whitaker, a middle-aged man with thick glasses, invited me to sit and slid a stack of documents toward me. "Mason," he said gravely, "your grandfather, Alfred Harlow, left his entire investment portfolio to you. Its current value is approximately $18 million. I sat stunned, as if punched in the face. $18 million? I repeated, my voice shaking. "You're joking, right?" Whitaker shook his head, adjusted his glasses, and pointed to a page of numbers. "This is his portfolio. Stocks, bonds, real estate, and investment funds. Carefully managed over years, it's grown significantly." I couldn't believe it. I remembered my childhood when my grandfather would sit me down, open his old notebook, and point to numbers. "This is a stock in this company, Mason. This is that fund. One day you'll understand their value." I'd laugh, thinking he meant a few $1,000s for a new bike or a trip. But $18 million? It was unimaginable. Whitaker explained further. The assets were held in a trust, ensuring no legal issues or publicity. Certain investments caught my attention. A stake in a renewable energy startup my grandfather called the future of the world. Shares in a charity for orphaned children, which hit me hard, knowing he'd thought of me. And a small plot of land outside Traverse City where he dreamed of building a community center. "Your grandfather wanted you to carry on these projects," Whitaker said. "He believed in you." I left the office overwhelmed, stunned, confused, and a little scared. I didn't know what to do with this money, this responsibility. All I knew was that my grandfather had left me not just wealth but his dreams. And I, a free-spirited tour guide, now faced a future I'd never prepared for. Outside, the biting cold of Traverse City stung my skin through my thin jacket. My mind was still reeling with the numbers. $18 million, stocks, the plot of land, and my grandfather's words about doing good things. I climbed into my old pickup truck, the one that had accompanied me on countless journeys, and started the engine. The roar of the motor couldn't drown out the thoughts surging in my head. I didn't drive back to Minneapolis right away. I just wanted to drive, to go somewhere, to let the wind carry away the heavy feeling crushing my chest. The road out of town wound through pine forests, where golden leaves fell gently in the glow of the sunset. I turned on the radio and an old country song played, but I couldn't hear it. I thought of my grandfather, the way he sat by the fireplace, pointing to his notebook and saying, "Mason, you'll do it." I thought of my grandmother, her red-rimmed eyes as we stood by his grave, and I thought of myself, a 29-year-old who once thought he could conquer the world, now feeling small in the face of what my grandfather had left behind. Rain began to fall, tiny droplets hitting the windshield, blurring my view. I slowed down, but my mind was lost in thought. I wondered if I was strong enough to carry on my grandfather's dreams, if I could become the man he believed in. Suddenly, a blinding light cut across my vision. A massive, noisy truck barreled out from a curve ahead, swerving into my lane. I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding, but the rain-slicked road sent my truck spinning. The screech of tires, the deafening crash of metal, and then darkness. I don't know how long I was in that darkness. I only remember a bone-chilling cold, as if my body were floating in an endless void. At times I heard faint sounds, ambulance sirens, people shouting, the beeping of machines. But I couldn't open my eyes, couldn't move. I wanted to call out to my grandfather, to ask him why things had turned out this way. But I only saw his figure fading in my memory like a dream slipping away. When I woke, the harsh white light of the hospital stabbed my eyes like 1,000 needles. My head throbbed, each pulse threatening to split my skull. My throat was parched, as if I'd swallowed sand. I tried to move, but my body felt heavy, pinned to the bed. A nurse stood beside me, her face blurry in my hazy vision. "Mr. Harlow, you're awake," she said, her voice gentle but tinged with concern. "How do you feel?" I croaked, my voice hoarse. Where am I? What happened?" The nurse checked the machines beside me, then gave a reassuring smile. "You're at St. Mary's Hospital in Minneapolis. You were in an accident. But don't worry, everything's okay now. We'll take care of you." Accident. The word echoed in my mind, but I couldn't recall anything clearly. Just the blinding light, the crash of metal, and then darkness. A man walked in wearing a white coat, his salt and pepper hair framing a calm but serious expression. "I'm Dr. Reynolds," he said, sitting beside my bed. "Mason, you've been in a coma for 3 days after a serious car accident. Do you remember anything?" I shook my head, trying to piece together my memories, but all I found were fragments. The rainy road, the truck, and my grandfather's voice echoing somewhere. Dr. Reynolds jotted something on a clipboard, then looked at me. "You sustained a significant spinal injury. We performed surgery to stabilize it, but the damage to your lower spine may affect your ability to walk." I blinked, trying to process his words. "Affect? What does that mean?" I whispered, my voice faltering. He placed a hand on my shoulder, his eyes full of empathy. "We can't say for certain yet, Mason. It's possible you'll have difficulty using your legs, but we'll run more tests and start rehabilitation. The most important thing now is that you rest and stay strong. Difficulty using my legs. His words hit like a slow, sharp knife, cutting through the last remnants of my hope. I looked down at my legs, motionless under the white blanket, and tried to lift them even just a little. Nothing. Just a numb sensation, as if they no longer belonged to me. My heart pounded, my chest constricted. No. No way, I muttered, tears streaming down my cheeks, hot and unstoppable. Me, the tour guide who ran through forests and stood on cliffs watching the sunrise, unable to lift my own legs? Dr. Reynolds gripped my shoulder firmly, his voice steady. Mason, I know this is hard to accept, but rest assured, we'll do everything we can to help you recover. You need time, and you need strength. Strength. The word felt so distant. I wanted to scream, to ask him where I'd find strength when my entire world had just collapsed. But I just lay there, staring at the stark white ceiling, feeling like I, too, was fading away, along with my grandfather's dreams I hadn't yet touched. The days that followed passed in a haze of medication and pain. The hospital became my prison, with the incessant beeping of machines, the sharp smell of disinfectant, and the throbbing pain radiating from my back to my immobile legs. I lay in bed, staring out the window where autumn sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting pale golden streaks across the floor. Each time I tried to move, I felt only numbness, as if the lower half of my body belonged to someone else, a lifeless stranger. Nurses came and went, changing bandages, checking my blood pressure, asking questions in their professional tone, but I only nodded, unwilling to speak much. I was afraid that if I opened my mouth, despair would pour out like a river breaking its banks. I thought about Rachel, my fiancée. We met 3 years ago on a tour in Colorado. She was one of my clients, a city girl with shimmering blonde hair, a radiant smile, and eyes as blue as a lake. She loved my stories about untamed roads, and I was captivated by her confidence, her vibrancy. We quickly fell in love, sharing dates by the Mississippi River and short trips I arranged just to make her happy. A year ago, I proposed to her under the moonlight on a mountain peak, and she said yes with tears sparkling in her eyes. We dreamed of a small house, adventures together, maybe kids. Now it all felt like a fantasy. I hadn't dared to call her. How could I say, honey, I'm paralyzed. I'm not the man you once knew? But on the afternoon of the 4th day after I woke up, the hospital room door opened and Rachel walked in. My heart pounded at the sight of her, still as beautiful as ever in a leather jacket and carrying a designer handbag. I tried to smile, raising a hand to wave, but she only nodded, her gaze avoiding mine. Mason, she said, her voice cold as a winter wind. She didn't rush to my bedside, didn't hug me, didn't ask about my condition. Instead, she stood at a distance, arms crossed, as if she were at a business meeting, not visiting her soon-to-be husband. You're here, I said, trying to keep my voice cheerful despite my parched throat. I missed you so much. She looked at the floor, then out the window, anywhere but at me. The doctor called me. They said you were in an accident. That was all she said. No tears, no concern. A wave of unease rose in me like a dark undercurrent. Sit down. I have a spinal injury. The doctor says I might not walk again. I waited for her reaction, a hug, a word of comfort, anything, but Rachel just shrugged, her voice flat. Yeah, I know. They told me over the phone. I tried to sit up a bit, leaning on the pillow, but the pain made me wince. Can you stay for a while, help me get a glass of water? She glanced at her watch, then sighed. Mason, I'm busy, I'm just stopping by. Her words cut like a knife, but I still tried to hold on. Busy with what? Can't you stay with me for a little while? She bit her lip, her eyes dodging mine, and then the door opened again. A man walked in, tall, dark-haired, dressed in a sharp suit. He looked at me with an unfamiliar gaze, then turned to Rachel. You okay? Let's go. My heart stopped for a second. Who's that? I asked, my voice trembling. Rachel looked at him, then at me, and finally, with an indifferent tone, she said, "This is Mark. We're together. Together." The word thundered in my head. I stared at them, trying to comprehend, but everything blurred. Together? Since when? Mark stood there, hands in his pockets, silent, but his eyes were full of pity. Pity for me, the man lying motionless in bed. Rachel sighed, as if explaining a trivial chore. "For a few months, before your accident, I wasn't happy with you anymore, Mason. You were always gone, leaving me alone. Mark is different. He's stable. He's there for me." The world crumbled around me for the second time. Shock, pain, and anger swirled together. You cheated on me? We were going to get married." I reached out, trying to grab her hand, but she stepped back as if I were contagious. "Don't do this, Mason. I came here to make things clear. We're done." I couldn't believe it. Tears welled up, but I fought to hold them back, clinging to the last shred of my dignity. "Rachel, don't go. I can change. My grandfather left me an inheritance, $18 million. We could live comfortably. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. I'll take care of you, even like this." I spoke quickly, hoping the money would keep her, would make her see I was still worth something. But Rachel laughed, a mocking, cold laugh. "An inheritance? 18 million? Mason, are you making this up to keep me? You think I'm stupid enough to believe that? You're just a tour guide, and your grandfather lived in that little town. Where would he get that kind of money?" She turned to Mark, smirking. "Listen to this. He says he's rich now." Mark chuckled, shaking his head. "Rachel, let's go. Don't waste time." Her words stabbed deep into my heart. You don't believe me? It's true. My grandfather left it to me through a trust. I can prove it." But she just shook her head, her voice dripping with contempt. "Even if it's true, so what? You think money can buy love? You're a burden now, Mason. A guy in a wheelchair for life. Who'd want to live with that? I'm not here to play nurse." She turned, linked arms with Mark, and walked out of the room without looking back. The door slammed shut, leaving me alone in a deadly silence. I lay there, tears streaming down my face, my body aching, but nothing compared to the pain in my heart. The accident had broken my body, but Rachel, the woman I loved, the one I trusted, had torn through my pride, shredding what was left of me. A burden. The word echoed in my mind like a curse. I thought of my grandfather, his lessons about independence, about strength. But at that moment I felt only weakness, betrayal, and a loneliness deeper than ever. In the hours that followed, I lay still, staring at the ceiling, trying to breathe. Nurses came, asked questions, but I didn't answer. I thought of my memories with Rachel, picnics by the river, kisses in the rain, promises of forever. All lies now. She'd betrayed me long before, when I was still whole, and now, when I needed her most, she discarded me like a broken thing. I gripped the bedsheet, trying to find anger to replace the pain, but there was only emptiness. How could I go on? With useless legs, a broken heart, and money that now seemed meaningless. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake, listening to the rain patter against the window, thinking of the dark future ahead. Rachel was gone, taking my last shred of hope with her. But deep inside, a small part of me began to stir. The part my grandfather had nurtured, the part about independence. I would get through this, no matter how much it hurt. But for now, the pain was too overwhelming, and I could only cry in the darkness. The next morning, I called my boss and briefly explained the accident. He was sympathetic, promising to hold my job if I recovered, but I knew it was just a kind gesture. My work demanded physical strength, freedom, things I no longer had. I thought about my grandmother, but couldn't bring myself to call her. She'd already lost my grandfather, and I didn't want to burden her with more shock. I lay there alone with layers of pain piling up, wondering what life still held for me. The days that followed dragged on in a monotonous, painful loop. Mornings began with painkillers, followed by rehabilitation sessions where therapists tried to stimulate my lifeless muscles. They spoke of progress and hope, but all I felt was helplessness. Every time I looked down at my legs still under the blanket, I remembered Rachel calling me a burden. Physical pain blended with emotional torment, forming a heavy weight in my chest. I tried reading books, watching TV, but my mind kept wandering to the past, to my adventurous trips, to my grandfather sitting by the fireplace teaching me about life. Now it all felt impossibly distant. I started receiving visits from colleagues and friends. Tom, my closest friend from work, came by with a bouquet of flowers and some candy. He sat by my bed talking about new tour groups, trying to make me laugh. "You'll be back, Mason. You're the best guide we've got." I forced a smile, but deep down I knew the chances were slim as a thread. When Tom asked about Rachel and I briefly told him about her betrayal, he exploded, cursing her as a heartless woman. His words offered some comfort, but only a little. I was still alone, trapped in my own body. Then one rainy afternoon, as I lay watching raindrops streak down the window, the hospital room door opened. I turned my head and my heart seemed to stop. It was my parents, Peter and Judith Harlow, the people who had abandoned me when I was 5 years old. They stepped inside, my father in an old suit, his hair now completely white, and my mother in a long coat, her carefully made-up face unable to hide the wrinkles of age. They looked at me, and for a moment I saw something resembling concern, or at least a pretense of it. "Mason, my boy," my mother said first, her voice trembling as if holding back tears. She approached the bed, taking my hand. "I heard about your accident. I was so worried. Why didn't you call me?" I lay there, stunned, unsure how to react. Worried? They hadn't called me once in over 2 decades. My father stood behind her, arms crossed, his voice low. "Yes, son. We came as soon as we heard. The hospital called us." I pulled my hand away, a surge of discomfort rising. "The hospital called? How would they have your number?" My mother glanced at my father, then back at me, forcing an awkward smile. "Well, we have a friend who works at a brokerage firm where your grandfather managed his investments. She happened to hear about the inheritance, then learned about your accident and called us. We were so worried, you know. So they came for the money, not for me. My grandfather had left the assets in a trust, keeping it confidential. But somehow the news had leaked through my mother's friend in the financial world where my grandfather had invested." I tried to stay calm, but my voice trembled with anger. "So you're here because of the inheritance?" My mother shook her head, her eyes wide as if offended. "How could you think that? I'm your mother. I just want to help you. You're in this condition now. You need someone to care for you. We can be there for you, support you." My father chimed in, his tone stern. "Exactly, Mason. Your grandfather left the assets to you, but we're family. Your mother and I deserve a share. After all, I'm his son." Their words hit like a punch to the face. Family? They'd abandoned me at 5, leaving me to be raised by my grandparents without a single call or letter. Now, as I lay motionless in a hospital bed, they showed up with fake smiles, demanding a piece of the fortune my grandfather had left solely for me. Blood rushed to my head, anger surging. "No," I said firmly, my voice louder than I expected. "Grandpa left it to me, not to you. He had his reasons. You abandoned me when I was a kid, and now you pretend to care? Don't." My mother sat in the chair by my bed, smoothing the bedsheet as if trying to soothe me. "Don't say that. I regret it so much. Back then, your father and I were young, getting divorced, unable to raise you. But now you need money for treatment, for living. We can help manage it, take a share to care for you." Her voice was sweet, but I could see the greed glinting in her eyes. My father stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Mason, think carefully. The estate your grandfather left is a huge sum. How can you manage it alone? I have business experience. I can invest it to grow. We're blood. Don't let outsiders benefit." I shook my head, my heart pounding. "You're outsiders to me. My grandparents were my real family. You're just selfish. I'm not sharing anything. Grandpa set it up in a trust, and I'll honor his wishes." The tension escalated. My mother started crying, crocodile tears rolling down her cheeks. "You're so cruel. I'm your mother. You can't treat me like this." My father's voice grew louder, angry. "Who do you think you are? I'm your father. I have rights. If you don't share, I'll sue. I'll get a lawyer to claim my part." The argument grew fiercer. My body felt exhausted, the pain in my back flaring, but I didn't back down. "Get out! I don't want to see you anymore," I shouted, my voice breaking from fatigue. My mother stood, wiping her tears, her voice shrill. "You'll regret this, Mason. We'll find another way. Don't think the trust is untouchable." My father nodded, his eyes hostile. "Exactly. We'll see a lawyer. You can't keep it all." I couldn't take it anymore. My hands trembling, I pressed the call button for the nurse. A young nurse entered, looking at the scene with concern. "Sir, is something wrong?" I gasped. "Please ask these two to leave. They're exhausting me." The nurse looked at my parents, her voice polite but firm. "Please, the patient needs rest. You need to leave." My parents glared at me one last time, their eyes filled with resentment. My mother whispered, "You'll regret this." Then they turned and walked out, leaving a heavy silence behind. I lay there, gasping, tears streaming uncontrollably. The physical pain was now overshadowed by the storm in my heart. They, my own flesh and blood, had returned not to love me but to take from me. I thought of my grandfather, of why he didn't want them at his funeral. He knew. He'd protected me. But now, I had to protect myself. After the confrontation with my parents, I immediately called Mr. Whitaker, my grandfather's lawyer. His voice over the phone was as calm and professional as ever. "Mason, don't worry. The trust was designed to protect against claims like this. They have no legal standing, but if they try to sue, we'll handle it." I nodded, though he couldn't see me, and felt a sliver of relief. But anger still smoldered in my chest. I imagined my parents somewhere, scheming to take what my grandfather had left solely for me. It wasn't just money. It was his legacy. The lessons he taught me about independence and responsibility. I swore to myself I wouldn't let them touch it. The days that followed dragged on in an exhausting cycle. The hospital became my entire world. Sterile white walls, the incessant beeping of the heart monitor, and the pungent smell of disinfectant that made me nauseous. During the day, I tried to appear strong for the nurses and doctors, but at night, when the room sank into darkness, despair truly hit. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain patter against the window like whispers from the past. I thought of my old tours, the wind rushing through my hair on mountaintops, the rustle of leaves underfoot as I jogged through forests. Now, those were distant memories, as if they belonged to someone else. The hurt ran deeper than I'd imagined. It wasn't just physical, it was mental. I felt betrayed by my own body, by life itself. Rachel had left, calling me a burden. My parents returned only to demand money. And my grandfather, one of the most important people in my life, was gone forever. Many nights I cried silently, clutching the bedsheet until my knuckles turned white. "Why me?" I whispered into the darkness. I wondered if it was worth going on when everything had shattered. Dark thoughts of ending it all flickered through my mind, but I pushed them away. No, I couldn't. My grandfather had left me not just wealth, but responsibility. "Money is a tool, Mason. Use it wisely." His voice echoed in my head. I had to keep going, to carry on what he'd left me, to prove I was worthy. That duty was the only thing holding me back from the abyss, a fragile thread keeping me tethered. I picked up the phone countless times, dialing my grandmother's number only to hang up. She was nearly 80, her health frail since my grandfather's death. She had high blood pressure, and her doctor had warned about the risk of a stroke if she faced too much stress. How could I tell her, "Grandma, I'm paralyzed. I can't walk anymore"? I imagined her trembling voice, her tears, and my heart clenched. I didn't want to cause her more pain. Instead, I called Tom, asking him to check on her and pass along a message that I was busy with work. "You're hiding this from her?" Tom asked, his voice laced with concern. "Just for now," I replied. But I knew I couldn't keep it a secret forever. In the days that followed at the hospital, I began learning to use a wheelchair. Erin, the nurse primarily responsible for my care, wheeled me through the hallways, teaching me how to maneuver it. The first time I left my room, the breeze from an open window brushing my face reminded me of my tours. I cried but quickly wiped the tears away. "You're making good progress," Erin said. I nodded, but inside there was still an emptiness. That night I lay awake again, thinking of my grandmother. She called a few times, asking why I hadn't visited. "Work's been busy, Grandma," I lied, forcing a cheerful tone. But I knew time was running out. I had to tell her the truth, no matter how painful. After 4 months in the hospital, Dr. Reynolds finally signed my discharge papers. "You're ready to go home, Mason," he said, patting my shoulder lightly. "Keep up with therapy and stay strong." I nodded, but my heart was heavy. Home. Where was that? My rented apartment in Minneapolis was now just a cold, empty space filled with memories of Rachel and the trips I'd lost. I couldn't stay there, alone with my immobile legs and silent walls. I decided to return to Traverse City, to my grandmother. The place where I grew up, where my grandfather taught me about inner strength. It was the only place I felt safe, even though I knew the truth about my condition would hurt her. First, I called my boss, Mike, to resign. His voice over the phone was full of surprise and concern. "Mason, are you sure? We could arrange desk work for you or wait for you to recover." I sighed, explaining briefly that my condition was permanent. "It won't work, boss. I can't lead tours anymore. That was my job, my passion." He was silent for a moment, then sighed. "I understand. You were part of the team, Mason. But if you change your mind, the door's always open." Then I mentioned my grandfather's inheritance. Not in detail, just enough for him to know I'd be financially secure. "My God, congratulations. That's a hell of a gift from the old man. You deserve it." I could hear him smile, but it was laced with sympathy. He promised to tell my colleagues, who would send their congratulations. Tom called right after, his voice a mix of excitement and regret. "You're rich, you devil. But I'm gutted I won't see you at the office anymore. I'm so sorry, but congrats. You can live like a king now." His words warmed me, but they also reminded me that my life had changed forever. Packing up in Minneapolis wasn't easy. I hired a moving company to help since I couldn't do it myself. Sitting in my wheelchair, I watched them pack my belongings. Worn-out travel clothes, photos from the road, and a few keepsakes from Rachel that I tossed in the trash without hesitation. The apartment grew emptier, and a quiet sadness settled over me. I handed the keys back to the landlord, who looked at me with pity. "Good luck, Mason," he said. I nodded, then hired a moving truck to take my things to Traverse City. The over 400-mile journey felt endless. I sat in the passenger seat watching the scenery pass by, snow-covered forests, frozen lakes, and wondered if I was running away or coming home. When the truck stopped in front of the old wooden house in Traverse City, my heart pounded. My grandmother knew nothing about the accident. I'd hidden it from her for months, claiming work kept me busy. I got out of the truck in my wheelchair with the driver's help and rolled toward the door. My grandmother opened it, her wrinkled face lighting up with a radiant smile. "Mason, you're home. I've been waiting forever." But her smile vanished when she saw the wheelchair. She froze, hand over her mouth, eyes wide with horror. "Oh my God, Mason, what happened?" What's wrong?" Her voice trembled, frail like autumn leaves. I stopped, tears welling up. "Grandma, I was in an accident. I'm paralyzed from the waist down. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I didn't want you to worry." She rushed forward, kneeling beside my wheelchair, her frail arms wrapping tightly around me. "Oh, my boy, why didn't you tell me? I'm heartbroken for you," she cried, hot tears soaking my shoulder. I hugged her back, the familiar warmth spreading, smells of cookies and pine wood, the scent of my childhood. We held each other there on the snowy path, our sobs mingling with the howling wind. She stroked my hair, whispering, "Why did you bear this alone?" "I'm your grandma. We're supposed to share everything." I cried too, all the pent-up pain pouring out. "I was afraid you'd be shocked, Grandma. You already lost Grandpa." She shook her head, wiping her tears. "I'm stronger than you think. Now you're here, and I'll take care of you." In that moment, amidst the freezing Michigan winter, I felt warmer than ever. My grandmother didn't just love me. She scolded me for hiding the truth, but it was a loving scolding, letting me know I wasn't alone anymore. The first days at my grandmother's house were a challenging adjustment. The old wooden house wasn't designed for a wheelchair. Small steps, narrow hallways, and a cramped bathroom left me fumbling. My grandmother helped with everything from pushing me through the living room to cooking my favorite meals. Toasted bread with homemade cherry jam, steaming chicken soup. "Eat up to keep your strength," she said, her voice full of encouragement. I slowly learned to manage, rolling around the house, dressing myself, even trying to cook simple meals from the low kitchen counter. There were moments when I snapped, slamming my hands on the wheelchair in frustration, but my grandmother was always there, hugging me and saying, "Take it slow, dear. I learned to live without your grandpa. You'll learn this too." Her support and encouragement became my strength, helping me adapt to this new, slower life filled with love. Then, a few weeks after returning home, I met Hannah. She was an elementary school teacher in town, a country girl with long brown hair tied in a ponytail, a warm smile, and honest brown eyes. I first met her at a small lakeside cafe where my grandmother wheeled me to get some fresh air. Hannah worked there on weekends, serving coffee and pastries. When my grandmother ordered, Hannah brought our order with a beaming smile. "Hi, Mrs. Lillian," and "Hi there." I nodded but avoided her gaze, self-conscious about the wheelchair. "Thanks," I mumbled, staring at my coffee. I thought of myself as a disabled man. Who would want to talk to me? But Hannah didn't give up. On later visits, when my grandmother brought me back, she started conversations. "You're Mason, right? Mrs. Lillian said you used to be a tour guide. Sounds exciting?" Her voice was genuine, without a trace of pity. At first, I kept my distance, answering curtly, "Yeah, used to be." I was afraid that if I opened up, she'd see my weakness. But Hannah was patient, sharing stories about her work, teaching kids to paint, reading them fairy tales, and asking about my travels. "Tell me about Colorado. I've never left Michigan." Slowly, through simple moments, a hot coffee, an afternoon by the lake watching the sunset, I began to open up. Our connection grew naturally, without force. Hannah visited my grandmother, bringing homemade cookies, and sat talking with me for hours. She shared her own tough childhood. Her father died young. Her mother struggled to raise her siblings, and I found myself relating. "I'm not perfect, Mason. Everyone has scars," she said once when I confessed my insecurities. We went for walks. She pushed my wheelchair along cherry tree-lined paths, telling jokes, singing old folk songs. One day during a sudden rain, we took shelter under a tree and she held my hand. "You're stronger than you think." My heart stirred, not from pity, but from her sincerity. Hannah pulled me out of my shell bit by bit through simple moments, a picnic by the lake, a night watching old movies, or just sitting together in silence. I started smiling more, started dreaming of a future with my grandmother, with Hannah, and with my grandfather's dreams that I would carry forward. After 3 years together, I proposed to Hannah by the lake during an autumn sunset, as golden leaves fell like rain. Sitting in my wheelchair, I held a simple ring, my grandfather's gift to my grandmother, and said in a trembling voice, "Hannah, you're my light. I can't walk beside you, but I want to be with you forever." She cried, knelt down to hug me, and whispered, "Yes, Mason. I love you for who you are, not your legs." Our wedding was simple, held at the wooden house with my grandmother as a witness, a few friends from Traverse City, and Tom flying in from Minneapolis. My grandmother cried throughout, stroking my hand. "Your grandpa would be so happy, Mason." Hannah wore a plain white dress, and as we exchanged rings, I felt a new strength. Not from my body, but from my heart. Our married life began with mornings where Hannah wheeled me to the garden, evenings where my grandmother told old stories and dreams we built together. But life didn't let me stay peaceful for long. A few months after the wedding, on a drizzly afternoon, a knock echoed at the wooden house's door. Hannah answered, and I heard her surprised voice. "You're..." I wheeled into the living room and my heart stopped. It was Rachel, my former fiancée, who abandoned me in the hospital with mocking words about being a burden. She stood there, clothes soaked, eyes red, makeup smudged. "Mason, Mason, I was wrong," she sobbed, rushing into the room uninvited. Hannah looked at me, her eyes full of questions, but I signaled for her to stay. Rachel knelt before my wheelchair, grabbing my hand, her voice choked. "I heard about your inheritance. $18 million. I didn't believe it at first, but Mark, he told me. He works with a friend of your dad's. I made a mistake leaving you. I regret it so much. Let me come back, Mason. We can be happy. I'll take care of you." I pulled my hand away, a mix of anger and amusement surging. She wasn't here for love. She was here for the money, just like my parents years ago. My grandmother emerged from the kitchen, her face hardening. "Who are you? How dare you come here crying?" Rachel glanced at her, then back at me, pleading. "Mason, I know you still love me. I could claim rights. We were engaged. I could sue for a share of the estate, but I don't want that. Just forgive me." Her words hit like a punch, making the living room air tense and suffocating. Hannah stepped forward, gripping my hand tightly, her voice calm but firm. "Rachel, is it? Mason told me about you, but he's my husband now and we're happy. You should leave." My grandmother interjected, her voice trembling with anger. "You abandoned my grandson when he needed you most, and now you're back for money? Get out of my house." Rachel stood, tears still falling, her eyes flashing with desperation and calculation. "Mason, you'll regret this. I'll get a lawyer. We had a verbal engagement contract. I have rights." She turned and stormed out, leaving a heavy silence. My heart raced, but this time not from pain, from the strength I felt from Hannah and my grandmother. I called Mr. Whitaker immediately, briefly explaining Rachel's visit. He chuckled over the phone. "She has no legal ground, Mason. A verbal contract? That's just a bluff. We'll send a cease and desist letter if needed." Hannah hugged me, whispering, "You did great. I'm proud of you." My grandmother rubbed my back. "You've grown, Mason." Your grandpa would smile. For the first time, I felt truly strong. Not the boy abandoned, but a man protecting his family. Rachel sent a few pleading texts afterward, but I blocked her number and she vanished, leaving an old scar that had now healed. With their support, I began using the inheritance meaningfully. I hired architects to renovate the old wooden house, adding a small elevator for my wheelchair, expanding the living room into a cozy space, installing a modern kitchen, and creating a spacious backyard with stone paths. "So we can live comfortably," I told Hannah and my grandmother when the plans were finalized. The house became brighter, filled with light, with photos of my grandfather hung on every wall. We lived happily together, mornings with Hannah teaching at school and coming home to cook, my grandmother sharing old stories, and me managing the investment portfolio from my computer. I continued my grandfather's projects, investing more in renewable energy, donating to the orphanage charity, and using part of the money to build the community center on the land he left. Traverse City grew better through those contributions, and I felt I was living up to his legacy. We often visited my grandfather's grave. Peaceful afternoons with Hannah pushing my wheelchair and my grandmother carrying white daisies. We sat by his grave, sharing stories and thanking him for everything. One spring afternoon under the sunlight, I said, "Grandpa, I found happiness." And now, as I sit by his grave alone, looking back on the past and forward to the future, I see my life as a long, thorny journey. From an abandoned boy to a man in a wheelchair with a loving family, I've learned that true strength lies in the heart, not the legs. Independence isn't about roaming freely. It's about standing firm through storms. Money is a tool, but love and responsibility are the foundation. To you, those reading this story, I offer this advice. Don't let past scars define you. Embrace those who love you, carry on unfinished dreams, and remember that no matter how life knocks you down, you always have the strength to rise again, one way or another. Thank you, Grandpa. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Grandma. And thank you myself for not giving up.